Hey y'all, I'm Cal. Let's get messy. Hi guys, welcome to today's episode. Words are hard, um, where we say things eventually, right? So Tuesday was fun, and if you tuned in to the last podcast, you got to hang out with me and Bud, just being our normal silly selves. And when we watched it back to edit it, we were like, nah, just leave it all in. Share it all. I think it's important to let loose and be silly sometimes because life's hard, and I'm not going to let it make me hard. I'm going to be silly me when the time is right, when I feel like it. And I think it's important to be silly sometimes and unashamed of your weirdness, and because it lets people really get to know you, and I think it makes the difficult conversations and the uncomfortable experiences a little easier to manage for me anyway. So episodes like that will pop up now and again, but those are kind of the potatoes of what this is all about. And today we're going to get back to the meat. Um, so let's take a deep breath. Let's say it together. Words are hard. Like, for me, physically hard. Not, oh, I forgot that one word. That too, but I'm talking about in a deep physical, neurological, disorienting kind of way. And if you know what I mean, this episode's for you. And if you don't know what I mean, it's for you too, because chances are someone in your life struggles desperately with speech, and you've really probably never seen the full weight of it. Um, so today I'm going to talk about what it feels like physically and mentally and emotionally struggling with all that. And I'll tell you up front, the only thing that I'm going to edit out of this are these long staring pauses while I'm trying to get my words from here to here. And sometimes it can last up to 5 minutes where I'm just staring into an abyss trying to make whatever's happening in my brain connect to my mouth. And because I stole enough of your time on Tuesday, you don't need to see that. But I want to make it clear that what I'm talking about is not shyness. It's not just anxiety, although that does play into it and it sort of exacerbates the issue. I'm talking about when speech feels glitchy and disconnected and awkward. And for me, it's not that I don't know what I want to say. It's like there's just this traffic jam between my brain and my mouth. And so by the time the words actually come out, if they even do, they feel weird in my mouth. Sometimes the words just don't form. Sometimes I literally cannot get my mouth to cooperate. Um, and I've tried to come up with a way to describe it that I think everyone can understand. And the closest I can come is nails on a chalkboard. That's how speaking feels to me. So you think about when you hear that, or even when you just think about the feeling nails on a chalkboard, that's what the physical act of speaking feels like to me. And the idea of it is even worse. It makes my skin crawl. And it's not because I'm embarrassed. It's just something about the physical act feels wrong. It feels unnatural. It's jarring. I can have all of these ideas, fully formed sentences, beautiful conversations, but then I open my mouth and they just kind of scatter. I stumble. I say the wrong word. I swap syllables. My mouth doesn't match my mind. And again, it's not about being shy. I think you could probably tell by now that I'm not shy. And it's not about lacking vocabulary. I have a huge vocabulary. It's just I can't get it out. And it's something about, the way my brain is wired. Um, so why does this happen? I have dyspraxia, and it's also known as, and I'm reading this, developmental coordination disorder. And it's If you've ever heard the word or the definition, you're automatically going to think clumsy, tripping over air. And all of that happens to me on a daily basis. But what dyspraxia does is it affects the way your brain plans and coordinates movement throughout your entire body, including speech. Um, your brain has to choreograph countless tiny little muscles just to get a sentence out. And for most people, it's like breathing. It's automatic. The thought is there, you put it through whatever filtering process you have, it comes out of your mouth. You don't think about the act of speaking. But for someone like me, it's like, trying to play the piano with oven mitts on every single time. And the funny thing about it for me is I never put the two pieces together. I knew I could go from standing still to, face down on the ground just by breathing the wrong way. And I knew I couldn't get my hands to work the way I wanted them to. And I knew I couldn't get my words out the way I wanted them to. But I never connected the pieces. But think about it. If you can't get your hands and feet to cooperate, why should you expect your mouth to be any more cooperative? And to layer it in there even more, another thing I never put together until recently was my eye issues that I've had for my entire life. As a child, I was in therapy because, as the doctor put it, I didn't know how to use my eyes. I have no clue if the word dyspraxia ever came up. I was only around eight or nine, if I'm remembering correctly. But if it did, it nobody connected it to anything. And, to this day, I have a very difficult time focusing my eyes when reading or switching focus from one thing to another. They zoom in and out uncontrollably, and I have to make a conscious effort to focus them. So, anybody that knows me and has heard me say I can't wear the bifocals that I desperately need, this is why. Um, but back to the topic of words. What happens is when we go to speak, it's like our brain sends the message, but there's somewhere in the delivery system, in the neurology of it all, that lags. The words don't come out in the right order, or we lose track in the middle of a sentence because we're trying so hard to keep up with what we've already just said. It's like I want to cooperate, or I know what I want to say, but my words and tongue won't cooperate. My jaw feels heavy. I stumble, I stutter, I swap syllables, like my mouth, just like my hands and feet, can't keep up with what my brain is trying to tell it to do. So it makes everyday communication, feel like a performance that's, you haven't had a chance to rehearse for. And the bigger problem is, even when I do rehearse, the situation doesn't improve all that much. I've got 7 pages of written script, and I've got a teleprompter right in front of me, and I've practiced a dozen times and recorded 2 times already, and yet here we are. Um, Now, I do know that anxiety and over preparation absolutely plays a part in making it a little bit worse at times. I get that. Like you saw when I was talking to Bud in a more relaxed environment, it was much less noticeable. But if you pay attention, I promise you'll see it. And what you didn't see is the effort behind each and every word. But, where does that anxiety come from? And I sat down and I started trying to think about it. And for me, and it'll be different for everyone, I can identify 2 areas specifically: social media and previous work environments. Social media, it makes all of this so much harder to navigate, because wherever you look, you've got fast talkers, perfect delivery, charismatic speakers who the words just flow so eloquently and beautifully. And it's not their fault. I admire them tremendously. This has been a big issue for me in my life. So I wish I had that. Um, But it does distort, I think, the way we think communication is supposed to look. Everything online is edited and polished and trimmed down for the cleanest version. And even the unedited stuff is curated. I'm going to take this once I finally finish it, if I ever get it to an acceptable level. I'll take it and I'll create a little reel to put on Instagram. That'll have a highlight, and it'll probably look like I'm an excellent oral communicator. And we live in a world where you have to do that, sadly. And I'm going to do it. Let's just be clear. I'm going to do it. But the part that bothers me about that is that somebody else out there who is struggling with this may be having a negative impact on them because they haven't seen the full picture. All they see is that little clip, right? And that is the furthest thing from what I want to accomplish with this. So when you struggle with speech and when you pause or fumble or sound unsure, you start to feel like you're broken, like you don't belong in the conversation, like the words that you do manage to get out, meaningless, nothing. Nobody wants to hear them. But social media is a lie, y'all. It's a very filtered version of reality. All of us, we have real pauses and real speech and real awkwardness. But for those of us that are neurodivergent or suffer with dyspraxia and executive dysfunction, I really think we need to see more of this awkwardness. I feel very awkward just watching myself make this, right? But we need to see it because it's real. Um, and we start believing that we're the problem, that we're less articulate, less intelligent, less worthy of being heard. And, that couldn't be further from the truth. And then, work environments. I don't really think we need to say much about that because, we all know if you want to get ahead anywhere, you have to be a great communicator. And again, just like with social media, I get it. I understand why. But then there's the part of me that's just like, no, no. Think about all of the talent and knowledge and skills from very creative, highly intelligent people it's just being wasted because, the powers that be don't want to take their time and energy to even stop and consider that somebody like me might have something important to contribute, you know? No pressure or anything, right? And it's just infuriating. It absolutely infuriates me. And so I think what people don't see is how much energy goes into every single sentence that comes out. The mental scripting, the don't mess up inner voice, the fear of saying the wrong thing, not because we don't know the right thing, but because we might trip over it trying to get it out. And so it snowballs. The dyspraxia and the anxiety, they kind of feed off one another. And if you've never experienced this, there's still a good chance that you've brushed up against it at some point in your life. So think about how your brain short circuits when you're sleep deprived or overwhelmed, or when you walk into a room and you forget why you were there, or you're in the middle of a tense conversation and you just cannot get your point across the way you want to. That glitchy, frustrating fog. That's what a that's a glimpse of what some of us feel like on a regular basis. But it doesn't go away when we're rested. It's like baked into who we are. And it's not just physical with dyspraxia. It's emotional, it's social, it's invisible, but has the power to shape the trajectory of our entire lives. I know for me it has. Um, the funny part is it's so much more common than we think. I was doing some research, and dyspraxia affects anywhere between 5 and 6% of the population, which is out of 8.2 billion people, something like 415 million people. And yet, I guarantee you that so many of you listening, if so many ever listen, haven't even heard the word dyspraxia. And if you have, you don't really understand the full impact of it. Um, you know, they probably picture somebody being clumsy, because if you read the definition, and I should have thought to look it up, and I didn't to tell you the definition, but it's developmental coordination disorder. We think of coordination, we think of tripping and falling, right? Um, but it affects everything for me, from handwriting to speech to planning to organizing my thoughts. And, like I've mentioned before, executive dysfunction is part of the package too, which, makes starting and sequencing and finishing tasks, it's like a constant uphill battle. So I think people don't see the behind the scenes work, the way our mouths hesitate or our words get stuck. They pick up on is the stammer or the silence or the blood red face full of embarrassment, which I have suffered through more times than I care to mention. Or, the sentence that came out a little weird, or they assume you're slow or spacey or unprepared or not smart. But the truth is, we're working 10 times harder to keep up with you because of this whole system we have built that doesn't work with our minds. And so you feel isolated and exhausted, and, especially when you're trying to do something like this, recording a podcast. Words are literally the entire point of this. And I guess that's why I'm doing it, because as you can probably tell, this is not easy. I get that even for the average person, it's not easy, but for somebody that struggles with an issue like this, it's even more complicated. But I think it's important. The scripting and the planning, that's the easy part. The speaking. So I won't ask for forgiveness when I stumble and pause and restart, but I will ask for understanding. Because it's just the way my brain and mouth work. I can say something 100 times, and then the 101st time mispronounce it. And, again, I want to reiterate the fact that we're not unintelligent. Most of us have very vivid thoughts and ideas and things that I think could change the world if we could just get them out the way we didn't intend, or if more people would just be patient and stop overlooking us or discounting us, because this is a struggle. But again, people make assumption. They equate fluency with intelligence, and it starts to sink in, and it makes you question your own brain. I have spent, my father, who I firmly believe was autistic, he passed away in 2002, and I've diagnosed him. Not that it matters, but he was a radio personality in our hometown and a newscaster, very eloquent speaker. And but we were a lot alike in so many ways, in our thinking, our sense of humor. I get a lot of my personality from him. But even being around him and looking back, I feel stupid because he didn't struggle with this the way I do. And I compare myself to him so much. And I think if he were alive today, he would smack me across the behind and tell me to get over it. But it sinks in. It's a very, very, very heavy weight. And I don't think it should be ours to carry alone. Um, then you add in things like childhood trauma, which I'm not going to get into today, but it amplifies the neurological issues that we're born with, and it amplifies them exponentially. Um, so this is all very layered and very complex, and if you're out here struggling with speech and structure and regulation and carrying the trauma, you're not imagining it. The weight is real. It's not your fault. And it's helpful to me knowing that I'm not alone. I had a chat with the Googles when I was writing all this, and I asked, are there well-known, I'll read it. Are there well-known people who've shared similar struggles with dyspraxia and executive dysfunction? And so I came across Daniel Radcliffe, Cara Delevingne. I'll never pronounce her name right, ever. Delevingne. She's fantastic. Florence Welch, Jamie Oliver, Holly Smale, fantastic author. And they've all spoken publicly about their experiences with, dyspraxia and executive dysfunction and neurodivergence, and how it's, you know, impacted their careers, their confidence, their daily lives, and it's huge when people like that speak out, because it makes space for the rest of us, the little Janes like you and me. It makes it easier for us. I feel like about it. There's less shame for me. And those with louder and more prominent voices, by speaking out, think it ignites a call to action that people will listen uh, to help things change. And I'm going to continue being transparent about it and not embarrassed about it and not apologizing anymore. I'm just going to explain it, I'm going to normalize it. And because people like me very often aren't the ones behind the mic, but I think we should be, because I think maybe finally we're in a time where people will start listening, where everyone will slow down. This world's gotten almost past the tipping point in terms of speed and pressure to perform, and everyone is exhausted. So maybe now is exactly the right time to get people to listen. And I think it's especially important because there's so many of us that discover what's really going on by stumbling on conversations like this. Like I mentioned in the last episode, I didn't know what executive dysfunction was. I didn't even know it was a thing. I just knew that certain things felt very difficult for me to start and that I could never quite say what I meant, and that even when I did, the words kind of never landed the way they sounded in here. Um, and those stumbled on conversations led me to autism and to realizing that maybe there wasn't anything, broken about me. Maybe I was just wired differently and always had been. The speech stuff, the motor stuff, the sensory stuff, the identity stuff, the social exhaustion. It all made sense. Finally, and I'm so fortunate that I stumbled on it finally when I did, and that I had, the insurance to cover the testing and was able to get in quickly. But more often than not, that's not the case. You know, that research, that digging in changed my life. And I'm not alone in that. There's a lot of us, I think, that stumble onto ourselves when we're just trying to make sense of a particular issue and why it feels harder than it should be. And to get into something else, this is a big reason why I'm a huge advocate of art therapy, art in general, for people who live with dyspraxia and executive dysfunction and all of the other stuff that goes along with neurodivergence. It's because so many times when I can't get the words out, I can make art, right? And it's like the art bypasses all of the stumbling blocks and the bottlenecks. And, it doesn't require perfectly timed muscle movements or rehearsed sentences. And it's a different way to express what's in your brain without words, because words are hard. And it's life changing. It's just absolutely life changing. It makes me feel seen when I can't explain myself. It helps me identify and shape emotions that feel stuck. And when my brain is in chaos trying to figure something out, it helps me identify patterns. Um, because clearly I can't always speak, fluidly, but I can create something beautiful. And even if it's not beautiful to you, it's beautiful to me because it's a successful expression of what I'm trying to convey. Um, it's powerful, and not just drawing or painting or what any kind of art, music, movement, journaling, cooking, making weird things out of clay, whatever it is that makes the truth come out of your brain sideways, that's art. Um, and it's just a nonverbal reminder that you're capable. There's so much more to us than what people hear or don't hear. And so I'll continue to talk about that forever. Because it's not just expression for a lot of us. It's survival. It's our part and a shared responsibility. And I want to say this loud and clear, ha ha, pun intended. This is not just our responsibility to fix. Those of us who struggle with this, yes, I work hard to communicate. I use tools like I'm using today. I practice, but I still show up, but it's also a two-way street. The burden of understanding in any relationship cannot fall entirely on one person, the person struggling to speak, especially. So I'm begging you, if you know someone who finds verbal communication hard, whether it's dyspraxia, executive dysfunction, autism, anxiety, whatever, you have a role too. Um, Especially if they've shared their struggle with you, it's a huge responsibility. So slow down, make space, wait longer than feels necessary sometimes, because I guarantee you we feel awkward in that silence too. But if we know that we have the time to get it out, chances are we're gonna be more successful in getting our point across. So don't interrupt, don't finish sentences, don't assume that we're stupid or unprepared or rude or checked out or whatever it is you're assuming. Ask what we need. Um, and for you who may be struggling with this, and for me, I'm speaking to myself as well, compassion. Have compassion for yourself. Don't spend one more day feeling like you're not enough or unimportant or stupid or dumb or unworthy or that what you have to say doesn't matter because that's a lie. You know, it does. We're allowed to be here. We're allowed to stumble over our words. We're allowed to talk about this. We're not broken. You know, we just require a little more patience, and a little more care and a little more understanding. And I think everyone benefits from learning how to care about each other a little more deeply, right? Um, so finally, I'll wrap this up. I'm going to put some resources in the description. If I can, I'll add a link to two documents that I've created. One's basically just kind of a flyer outlining some of the benefits and impact of art therapy. And then another one is one that I'm very proud of. It's a short, well, it's not short, it's like 25 pages, but it's kind of like an ebook that I wrote on the benefits of art therapy. It's very academic. I'm going to at some point pretty it up some and write it in a different tone, but it's got so much information, you guys. I had the best time researching and learning and discovering and putting it all together, but it's got what all do I have in it that I listed? It's got the science behind it, the mental and physical benefits, the modalities and techniques, and how it works in different settings. And oh, I included some case studies, the limitations of art therapy, the difference between an art therapist and an art therapy practitioner, and I included all the reference materials. I cited everything. So you can do your own research. Please, please, please. Anything you get from anybody, do your own research. Look at multiple sources and determine for yourself, what is right. Look at the facts. Don't just listen to what somebody tells you. Do your research and find the true facts. Um, but I'm also going to link some fantastic autistic creators whose videos played a really huge role in helping me discover all of this, and understand that it's not just me. They're from all different backgrounds and demographics. So there's like, and I'm sure most of if you're watching this because you're already aware of issues like this, you've probably heard of them. If you haven't, check them out. So we've got Taylor with Mom on the Spectrum. She's 30 something, I think, mom who got diagnosed after her children were diagnosed. There's Orion Kelly, that autistic guy. He's from Australia. He's hilarious. He cracks me up with his delivery. And he also has a book that I have that I'll link below. Um, and then there's Meg. She's a 20 something autistic young mother from the UK, I believe. She was late diagnosed and she discovered her autism through YouTube. And she's fantastic about including um, video clips from her childhood that sort of illustrate the issues that she's talking about. And it's fascinating. Um, they're all wonderful. And anyway, I'll also link a few personal favorite books surrounding autism and autistic authors. And so, yeah, I think I'll close this out the way I end phone conversations with my daughter. I don't have anything else to say. I love you. Bye. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.